Welcome to Worldbuilding Films, where we analyze the world, settings, and rules of films and TV shows to see if they work, if they don't, and if not, how they could be improved to enhance their stories. And today, we will be discussing the 2020 action fantasy film Monster Hunter, based on the popular video game franchise. Before we start, I should first and foremost clarify something. I have sadly not played the Monster Hunter games. So I apologize, but I won't be addressing the issue of adaptation here, if not for a couple of small exceptions, and will critique it only as a film. Then again, it seems like it started off on the wrong foot anyway, so either we just trash it all and call it a day, or we just take it for what it is. And ironically, I'm not that far off from the trashing part, considering that this was panned pretty much by everyone in every single way, and yeah, frankly, I can see why. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it to see what could be done to fix this latest failed video game adaptation. As usual, there will be spoilers ahead. The plot. We begin our story on a dark, stormy night in a strange world. A ship is sailing across the sands of a desert. Don't worry, we'll get to that. With on board an entire crew, such as the Admiral, aka Ron Perlman dressed as a lion and ready to hire another agent, a Toph cosplayer, some other random people, and one of our main characters called just the Hunter. Way to go, Hollywood. They're ambushed by a huge monster who was swimming under the sand, and Hunter gets knocked off the ship. We then cut to the middle of another desert in, yes, our real world here on Earth. Strike one for Monster Hunter fans, where we follow a platoon of Marine soldiers on their way to find out what happened to another platoon called Team Bravo that recently went missing, and the mission is led by our main character, Artemis. I'd name all the main characters in this platoon, but aside from her and this dude named Lincoln, they're frankly just a bunch of red shirts, as you'll later see, so don't worry, they won't matter much. They stumble upon some tracks that simply disappear without a trace, and moments later, a mysterious blue sandstorm comes from the horizon. The team does their best to run away from it, but as they do so, they find a series of large stones with glowing runes on them. The sandstorm becomes a full-on storm with blue lightning, and their vehicles end up being toppled over. When it's all clear again, they wake up in a new environment filled with dunes, and their comms don't seem to work at all. They're confused, trying to figure out what happened. As they travel across the dunes, they find the vehicles of the Bravo team, but they're all dead, burned by something that was so hot it turned sand into glass. And later, they find the ribs of what seems to be an enormous creature far bigger than anything they know.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Just then, we see our old pal Hunter, who was hiding on a large rock formation shooting a warning arrow at them. Before they can fully react, they're attacked by the same creature that hit the ship in the opening, giving us our first look at one of the titular monsters, a Black Diablos. And alright, gotta admit, these things are pretty damn awesome. They try to fight it off, but all firearms do absolutely nothing against it. So they hide towards the rock formation, where the Diablos has a harder time reaching them and then just leaves. The team thinks they're safe in this cave formation, but just as they lower their guard, these other bug-like monsters called the Narcillas appear, killing off almost everyone and stabbing Artemis. Hey, told you they were red shirts. Artemis wakes up sometime later, emerging from a cocoon, and finds a wounded and poisoned Lincoln there as well. They try to find a way out, but they're blocked yet again by the Narcillas, and find out that Lincoln's body was actually used to lay the eggs of these creatures, and so he dies from them. Artemis barely makes it out alive into daylight, which these specific monsters apparently can't stand. She makes it to the top of the rock formation, sees how isolated she is, and spots a strange tower in the distance. Seeing some rocks, she throws one of them on the sand, and the Black Diablos bursts from underground, proving that it's sensitive enough to feel even the slightest vibration on the sand, sort of like the worms from Dune. After finding a few shipwrecks on this rock island, again we'll get to that, she finds Hunter. The two fight, but he gains the upper hand, taking her back to his secret hideout with more Narcillas trying to reach in from the outside. The next morning they fight again, Artemis actually saves him from a near accidental death, and the two begin to make peace when she offers an obligatory product placement.
Great American chocolate bar.
Through some rough communication, since he doesn't speak English, Hunter offers the idea of using the stingers of one of the Narcillas to poison the Black Diablos, since all other methods don't work against it, and they get a stinger by using Artemis as bait.
Next time, you're bait!
and return to the shipwrecks, where they start setting up all sorts of traps. All the while, Hunter trains Artemis on how to use his weapons, which include some fancy-ass swords that can superheat and become electrified. Alright movie, you get one more point. Once it's all ready, they attack the Diablos, and Hunter manages to shoot a poisoned arrow in its eye, the only exposed weak spot, and after what is probably the nth time Artemis should have died, the Diablos finally collapses. The coast is now clear to roam the desert. With some difficulty, they eventually reach an oasis, filled with all sorts of less threatening creatures, and the tower is not too far off. But the danger isn't over yet, for while they rest, something comes from the sky to spell even more dangers for our heroes. And that something is a Rathalos, or in other words, a fucking dragon! Alright, yeah, small tip, big guys. I am goddamn obsessed with dragons. So even if this is technically a monster, I'm all for it. The Rathalos attack causes a stampede by these other monsters called the Apsaros. But at that moment, none other than the Admiral and his team swoop in to save the day. Artemis thanks him and...
Don't thank me yet.
He apparently speaks English. Interesting. Alright. When Artemis wakes up, she's in chains on their ship and gets free, where we're introduced to the crew again, as well as... that. Whatever. The Admiral apologizes for the high level of security, saying that he is weary of people from the other world who have come through in the past, hence where he learned to speak English. He explains that the mysterious tower is actually called a sky tower, a device that can breach between worlds, and is what caused Artemis to arrive in this new one, and was built by an ancient civilization which perished a long time ago after their own technology turned against them. It's supposed that our world had something to do with that, and the Admiral was traveling to find out exactly what, before they were ambushed by the Diablos. Now that they have retrieved Hunter again and have fixed their ship, their mission can continue. If Artemis can help them, they will help her return home. It won't be so easy though, as the Rathalos guards the tower. The only way to defeat it is to attack it just before it breathes its fire. The team finally sets off for the tower, and when they reach it, they see that it's powered by the lava coming from underground, which in turn helps it control the storm and open unstable portals towards our world. Just then, the Rathalos appears, in all its beautiful glory, and starts attacking. Lots of fighting happens while everyone barely misses giving the Rathalos the final blow, but Artemis still tries to find a way back home until she... just falls through the portal and is back home. Huh. Well, that's kinda anticlimactic. In fact, more Marines have already arrived on the spot, find her, and take her away. That's kinda weird. I expected we would have a little more of the... Oh, I guess it's not over. Okay, so a portal just appeared in the sky and the Rathalos jumped into our world instead. That's actually pretty interesting, as it raises the stakes a little. So Artemis survives a crash landing, because of course she does, while the Rathalos utterly decimates the rest of the Marines. She stares off the monster, rips one of its wings, and... just kills it already. Well, that was kind of quick. Oh, no, wait, my boo's okay, so it's about to counterattack when... apparently the entire damn team of the Admiral arrives to save the day, and Hunter defeats the Rathalos once and for all. Okay. They somehow came through the portal to warn Artemis that other monsters are arriving as well. So they're here to help our world with that, and the only way to do so is to officially destroy the tower. Another monster appears, apparently called a Gore Magala, ready to fight. The music builds up like a lot, our heroes charge, and... wait, no, you're not gonna make me think this ends. Come on, there's gotta be something else, right? Movie? Pick a goddamn ending already. Come on, that can't be the actual end, right? Surely there must be some sort of end credits or... You know, just for that, I won't even acknowledge the mysterious hooded figure there. Nope, not happening. Movie's over. That's what you get. Jeez. Alright, so, yeah. That's kinda it for the movie. It's something, I'll give you that. And as you might have already noticed, there's a lot the movie just refuses to explain because badly edited action comes first, I guess. Which on the one hand leaves a lot of room to theorize, but little to actually improve. So again, everything I'll be saying from here on out will be exclusively based on what the film is presenting, and aside from a couple of small references, we'll just pretend the games it's based on don't exist. Because otherwise I'd start off by saying no modern day world at all, and it would render everything else today utterly pointless. So there's your warning, we're reviewing it just as a film. Now let's start trying to fix this mess with people in the monster world. This world is clearly stating that they have their own humans there, just like us in our world, except that they've been surviving in this monster-filled landscape. There seems to be no difference in appearance, mostly, and it doesn't seem like they have any particular extra ability, at least none any different from Earth humans, for better or worse. And that, honestly, kinda has its ups and downs. Yes, from a story perspective, it's nice to have characters like our main hero, a fresh point of view for us as the audience, so the scales and stakes feel balanced. But the problem is that it doesn't make sense. We humans are the way we are because we are adapted to live in our current world environment. These guys, however, have supposedly lived for millennia surrounded by ginormous monsters. If so, how the hell did they survive all this time? It's like if this was the Flintstones, except these are monsters that are more dangerous than just regular dinosaurs, and this is supposed to have a serious tone, not a comedic or fun one. In fact, I was about to give the film a break the moment I saw that Hunter and the others had with them these special weapons that could even shoot fire and lightning and such, which made me think, oh, well, okay then, that would help them way more, so maybe this is more balanced than I thought, until I remembered that those weapons come from the monsters. In fact, everything they have comes from them. It's one of the few things I know for sure from the game itself, that these people fashion all their weapons, clothing, homes, and more by hunting these creatures. But then, really cool as they may be in game, even if here they look like bad cosplayers, how the hell did they get them if the monsters have goddamn superpowers as well? Frankly, there's only one solution that I can see. The people of this world can still look like humans if you want. It would certainly help them with the budget for makeup, but they necessarily have to be much stronger and more resistant than us regular humans. If you think about it, the Bravo team wasn't even able to bring down the Diablos, and firearms are the best thing we have to attack. So what chance could these other humans have? They need to be evolved to be much stronger than us, otherwise they wouldn't even be able to land a single blow against the monster's impenetrable skin, and they'd be hunted down to extinction. It would also explain how they're able to wield these huge-ass weapons that, let's face it, are incredibly cool in theory and function in the game more so as a rule of cool effect, but have no sharpness to them and would frankly be impractical. Not to mention, this would also explain why the people of this world didn't just die from having Nerscylla eggs nested under their skin. It's something that happens only to the Bravo team because their skin is much more delicate and can accommodate that. I'm not saying the people from this world should be bulletproof or anything, but they should be significantly more resistant than us at least. And yes, in this scenario, Artemis would then feel useless next to someone like Hunter if he's super strong and tough. But then again, brute force isn't everything. She and the other Earth humans would have something else as an advantage that these people don't. And that could be knowledge and technology. And yes, I know, I just said that the guns the team brought were useless, but then again, they were caught unprepared. So, what if Artemis wasn't just a soldier, but also something like a brilliant chemist? She was resourceful enough to figure out that she could cauterize her wound with gunpowder from a bullet after all. So we could extend that by saying that she would be doing tests with pieces of the monsters that Hunter would gather for her. Try out different solutions to see if their chemical composition could be altered in any way, and eventually find some combination that could be used as an advantage against the monsters. And yes, I know it's not that simple. You need a proper lab and tools and everything, not to mention time. But frankly, at this point, I think this is the least of the film's problems. All of this is still the best thing Earth humans would have that these other superhumans would be lacking. The Nersilla's poison. When Artemis is stabbed by the Nersillas, she goes unconscious and wakes up later emerging from these cocoons. But would she have been able to come out of it alive after a stab like that? I mean, look at it, that stinger looked like it pierced right through, and when I first saw it, I was convinced she had legit died despite being the main character. Although God forbid I give credit to this movie to be unexpected. Not to mention that the Nersillas have poison in them as explained by Hunter. But if that's the case, how the hell would she have been able to just emerge from that cocoon as if nothing happened? I thought for a moment that, perplexingly, the cocoon actually had healing capabilities. But then why didn't the other soldiers emerge as well?
Dash.
So that can't be the case. Thus, the only fix I think would help here is if the Nersillas don't actually have deadly poison in them. Instead, theirs is maybe a weaker poison meant only to subdue their prey to sleep or paralyze them, so that they can be consumed later, because maybe the Nersillas require to drink their prey rather than just eat it. It would help explain why Artemis didn't die, because they need their prey alive first, just incapacitated, and when she emerges from the cocoon, it's because she was lucky her Kevlar got in the way and maybe reduced the amount of sleeping poison, more so than her companions, who might have been stabbed in less protected areas. And when she'd wake up, the others might have been drained while inside their cocoons in the meantime. This could help her when planning their attack against the Diablos as well, because if in this scenario it was just a sleeping agent, but we also make her a brilliant chemist as mentioned before, she could figure out a way through experimentation to make the sleeping poison more powerful, or find a way to at least increase the dose as well to use against the Diablos so she and Hunter can later cross the desert freely. Maybe she could conduct these experiments in the shipwrecks and... Oh wait, right, that thing. The ships. Alright, now I can talk about it. That ship in the opening? Yeah, total bullshit. There's just no way that thing could have moved across the sand. And quite frankly, it's not even that creative of a visual idea. We already saw something like this in Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, as well as Avatar: The Last Airbender. Except that in the first one it was while inside of Davy Jones's locker, which had to do with magic and divine power. And in the second example they were using sand bending to move the ships. And even then they were more like boats than ships. The only sci-fi elements we have here are the monsters and the tower, both of which are outside the control of these people. And no, even if they had wind powers, I don't think fashioning their wings into sails would do the trick. This has absolutely no excuse. This ship is just way too heavy and shouldn't have moved at all. It should have remained stuck. And even if it did move, if the Diablos are so sensitive that they can feel a small rock landing on the sand from hundreds of feet away, by then they probably would have attracted hundreds of Diablos. But there is one little detail that I did find interesting. The Admiral's ship isn't necessarily the only one around here. There's also this collection of other ships, but they're stuck inside the rocky island. How though? Even assuming that sand surfing was possible for these ships like in the beginning, there's no sand at all in the spot they're stuck in, and they're just utterly broken and abandoned. This is actually curious, and it makes me think that this whole area at least was perhaps one big ocean at some point, which dried out, and these ships are just relics from the past. Possibly from when this supposed ancient advanced civilization was still around. I can't even theorize that perhaps these actually slipped in from our world, because the textures of these ships seem to be made from scales of other monsters, so they must have originated here, right? And if the scales of these monsters really are that hard, it would explain explain why these ships haven't decomposed entirely even if centuries or more have passed. Then again, that would depend on how hard they are, but I digress. So, if this was a sea that dried out, this could also be another clue for us. Perhaps we can say that the downfall of that ancient civilization caused some climatic alterations to the point that a few lakes and seas simply dried out, and ever since, these ships have all remained stuck. But instead of abandoning them entirely, the remaining people of this world could use them as safe points, traveling from one to the other to regain their strengths while dashing across the desert to avoid the Black Diablos. And to help with this, we could say that the Diablos' sensitivity to sand movements is good, but not this good, so that when people reach one of the broken ships, the constant vibrations caused from these flapping sails would help dampen their footsteps while they're inside. I wouldn't even be that surprised if these ships became some sort of religious sites because they offer a safe haven against these terrible monsters. But yeah, definitely no sand sailing. The Sky Tower. And here we are, the MacGuffin that started this whole plot. This Sky Tower was invented by the supposed civilization in the past. They came into our world, but after they did, their technology supposedly went against them and got rid of them all, leaving the world in a mess. In a way, that's actually kinda cool, as it could simultaneously explain why these elaborate buildings and these monsters exist at the same time, because there was a civilization with technology that could help them thrive without worry from the monsters. All that's left now, though, is this tower, which causes storms, which in turn causes these random portals to pop in and out of existence, all powered by constant geothermal energy. Fair enough on that part, by the way, I can close an eye on that. But that's it. That's all the info we're given, and the film leaves on a really frustrating and bad cliffhanger. And yes, I know, the director apparently had plans for future sequels, but quite frankly, it's useless if your first film doesn't succeed. So how can we fill in the gaps with the information we're given? Well, there actually is one little detail we can play with. If you pay attention, when we see our main team on Earth in the beginning, it's broad daylight, and when they go through the portal, it's still approximately around the same time of day. However, towards the end, when Artemis goes through again, she went from nighttime in the monster world to daylight on Earth. How though? Is this just the filmmakers who thought it looked cool in their heads and to hell with consistency? Well, most likely yeah. But if there's no other explanation, why don't we take advantage of it? What if these portals don't just breach through different dimensions, but through different time periods as well? Whenever one of them pops open in the monster world, yes, it pops into our Earth, but perhaps we can say that it opens up to a different time on our Earth. Sometimes it's in the present, sometimes it's centuries in the future, sometimes eons in the past or something. Each one a random time. If that's the case, it means that these two worlds could perhaps exist on different time scales, similar to Narnia in a way, where you can enter through the wardrobe at one time and come out either minutes later as if nothing changed, or as if an entire lifetime had passed by. This would then explain a number of things aside from this day-night inconsistency. Like, for example, what happened to this ancient civilization? We could assume that they were able to breach into our world with a mixture of their own scientific discoveries and advancements, sure, but also because perhaps there were some monsters who had particular magical energies or something like that. I mean, some blast fire and lightning from their bodies, so might as well as far as I'm concerned. Through a mix of these two elements, they didn't just enter our world, but because the portals were temporally unreliable, they ended up in our future. There they could have learned some scientific discoveries that we here on Earth are yet to make and decide to implement them for themselves. The only problem? Since it wasn't their discoveries to make, they weren't equipped with handling the consequences of them. So, when they returned to the monster world, the new ways they improved their own technology made them suddenly dangerous. And eventually, that technology turned against their own creators, leaving them almost extinct. Emphasis on the word almost, however, because the only ones who were left? The monsters, even if in small numbers, and the remaining people, who went from living and relying on technology to having to survive without it. We can even say that millennia have passed ever since, and their own descendants think that relics like the tower must have come from an entirely different civilization instead of their own ancestors. After so long, they've adapted once again to be stronger and more durable so they could survive the monsters that have remained. The monsters were stronger but much fewer, and the people were weaker but still with larger numbers. And as they repopulated the world over time, evolution found this new equilibrium and this new world order was formed, where hunting monsters and using their corpses and abilities was the primary mission for survival. We could even say that the original Team Bravo who came through before Artemis and her team did so through a portal that brought them like a couple of centuries earlier in the monster world, and the vehicles Artemis finds are old and rusted from decay and abandonment. A sort of Planet of the Apes reveal, if you will, and their surviving team was found by the people of this world, and they spent their lives stuck there, with some of their language and habits passed down through a few generations, so that some people like the Admiral could know English just in case others could ever return. Oh, and real quick, let's address the runes on Earth in the film's beginning. Even without our scenario, if these have existed for a long time, they either needed to be super well hidden, or at least some of the inhabitants around this whole area, Afghanistan by the way, based on the coordinates in the opening, must have known of their existence, even if just acknowledging them as superstitious folklore stuff. And even then, they're placed in the shape of a runway, as are the runes in the monster world, and this would be a major coincidence if this team just happened to be running exactly through that direction. So either place them in a circle where you get teleported regardless of which direction you go through, or just get rid of them entirely, at least while on Earth, because otherwise, how the hell did they get there? As for the ending, yeah, well, anything is better than what we got, but let's say this. In our scenario, if this tower, which has allowed these portals to continue because the original civilization who made them aren't around to turn it off anymore, can't actually pinpoint the exact time Artemis came from, and she'd be thrown into a completely different and random era, that would mean bad news for her. It would be a very high risk, and she'd have to be absolutely careful as to which portal she goes through and when. But let's say that during the battle with the Rathalos, Artemis manages to make her way inside the tower and sees that many of the commands of said tower are actually quite similar to the commands in our world, because, as established in this scenario, their technology was based on us even if it's a future us. So she might be able to find a way to adjust the controls and focus the tower's power so it opens a specific portal to her time. But in doing so, that portal is also much larger as well because it has more power put into it. Now there's a dilemma, because even assuming she were to go through, she now realizes that even the Rathalos could do the same as well. Cause frankly, if the Rathalos could enter our world as established in the film, why hasn't it done so before, since it's been guarding the tower for a long time? And so, because she'd be putting people in her own world in danger as well by letting the beast through, and we saw that gunfire does nothing against these creatures anyway, she has to make a hard decision. As much as she does want to make it back, she closes the portal, and even attracts the attention of the Rathalos towards the tower, doing her best to trick the monster into attacking it. In doing so, the tower gets destroyed. Maybe we could say she made it out alive by jumping with one of the weapons Hunter had at the end of the actual film, and both the monsters and the tower blow up to pieces. In fact, we could change that the Admiral didn't know about the Rathalos' weakness, and simply wanted to go in with as many fighters as they could and fight it with brute force. Because in this world, that's all these hardened people know when it comes to dealing with conflict. And so, Artemis could be the one who notices the way the Rathalos breathes fire, and she is the one who comes up with the solution on how to bring it down. Or maybe she tricks it to somehow breathe fire at the tower's base, which is already powered by lava, making it overcharge, explode, and possibly collapse on top of the Rathalos itself. And before she does this, maybe on the way out, Artemis also manages to take with her some extra tablets or books or whatever containing info on this supposed ancient civilization. She realizes she lost her way home, but at least she has salvaged precious information that could help these people improve and evolve technologically once again, perhaps without making the same mistakes they did in the past. It's not even too much of a stretch to assume she would do this, because a little detail I didn't mention in the actual film is that we see her take out a small wedding ring she keeps in a tin box. A ring she seems to be emotionally attached to, and when holding it she says, "I'm coming home." So apparently she has someone she loves and gives her motivation to go back home. But what if we changed that too? What if she was indeed married but might have lost her beloved at some point in the past, perhaps in some battle for the military? If that's the case, maybe she would have been working through that trauma this whole time, venting her frustrations through work. When she enters the monster world, she'd be trying to come back mostly to avenge her fallen teammates, sure, but being a soldier she would also acknowledge that returning home would be too high a risk for others. It's a moral duty that would stop her. It would be less of a problem for her to destroy the tower and stay in this new world, because she already lost the one thing she cared about at home and can instead find new purpose and redemption with these new people, and open up the doors for sequels. Cause quite frankly, filmmakers, again, if you want a sequel bait, you have to give us some satisfying ending first. And okay, real quick. Regarding apparently these things are called palicos and are an actual thing in the games. Just literal walking cats. I really don't have much to say about them other than two things. One, if you really have to add them, don't just throw one in there at random and never speak of it again, cause they sort of ruin the tone of the film, which is already struggling as it is at being taken seriously. Or if not even that, at least add more types of these weird extra races just to justify that this is a weird and colorful world after all. Or two, even if it's an adaptation, and even if you didn't have the budget to do more of them, then just cut them out entirely and call it a f***ing day. So that was Monster Hunter. And yeah, no surprise, everyone agrees that it's bad. Not just as an adaptation, cause again, as of right now, it's not my place to talk about that, but even as a standalone film. And even if these fixes would have helped, I don't think they would have saved it, because it suffers from too many other issues as well. From bad action, bad effects, bad directing, bad acting, and especially really, really bad editing. Which is a pity, cause the games do look really cool and are theoretically really fun as a concept. I could easily see this working, but frankly at this point I'm glad I didn't play the games, cause at least I saved myself a lot of potential pain and suffering, and at best I can just laugh this off as another bad attempt at a Hollywood cash grab. Anyway, that's all for today, folks. What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I talking out of my ass? Maybe. Let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Please consider subscribing to my Patreon to help support what I do here. And if there's any other franchise whose world building you'd like analyzed, let me know. Until next time, keep building worlds.